Hello, this is Xander Broeffle with CS2, and you are listening to the Revenue Growth Architects podcast. I am incredibly excited to welcome today's guests, our beloved host, co-host extraordinaire, Crissy. How are you doing?
Good. I'm not the host anymore, though, so just say ex-host.
Ex-hosts, there you go.
No, I know. I was just kidding. But yeah, it's great to be back on. Yeah, we'll see how my mom brain does today, but I think it'll do all right. And excited to be back on, and excited to be back on a little more frequently too. And not having to host this time around, so it's great. But thanks for having me on, Xander.
Of course. Thanks for joining us. So, today we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic, and It is why you need to secret shop your buyer's journey. I know that this is something that you're super passionate about, Crissy. I'm going to share just a really quick story before we jump into this. My mom, she used to work for a very large retailer, and she had a secret shopper that went through, and this person stole a lot of products. And she got brought into the manager's office, and the person revealed himself to be a secret shopper and said, I got away with a lot, but I have to say you were the most pleasant person that I've ever stolen from.
Wow, your mom must have a lot of interesting stories like that. But I have experience in retail as well. But the funny thing is I used to always catch the people like shoplifting, and then I would feel so terrible like once they would get caught, because it would be like teenage girls or something.
Always, right? But nobody can get anything past you, which is good.
I just knew what to look for. Just knew what to look for.
Well, this will be a little bit different than that type of secret shopper, right?
Yeah. And I think it's a good segue, like kind of, I was a little bit worried to say secret shop, because I didn't want people to think, we're going to try and spy on like what sales is doing, or like, that doesn't create alignment. If anything, I think teams need more alignment. But the thing that I wanted to preface is like, you're really kind of auditing yourself, like the stuff that you're building, the stuff that your team's building, and then the stuff that your team is supporting. And so I just wanted to make that clear. It's like, not trying to be sneaky or shady. If anything, you want to tell your sales managers, like, you're probably doing this, especially if you create like a pseudo account to do it. But yeah, so we're not trying to be sneaky here.
No sneaky. But something that can be super effective. So to talk about that effectiveness, first of all, when we just say secret shopping, can you give like a brief overview of the context that we're coming into this with, like at level first?
Yeah, so I think the thing is, like, there's and we look at this mainly from the inbound buyer journey. And that's usually the buyer journey a lot of the time, has started way before someone comes and like fills out a contact us form, or, becomes an MQL from an event or something like that. But it's really trying to, put yourself in that process. So, going through and creating, you can kind of create a kind of fake account for this, or like use like a friend's profile if you get their, approval or something like that, and email address, and filling out a form, and really kind of test, okay, what happens to me as a lead when I'm interested, and from a processing standpoint in your back end, but also like from the user experience, the front end, like what was that follow up like? What was the follow up time? Did I get like blocked from sync errors and no one ever followed up with me? Did I did I have a good experience booking time straight on the calendar? And then, what communication did I get afterwards? So really just kind of just testing out that kind of whole process, without just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to use my own email, fill out a form. The people from the team are going to disqualify me. It would be better if you kind of create like a profile for like a persona, and then also make sure that you have the data that supports your model to MQLU, which I'll talk about in a second. But really, you're just testing out that buyer journey. It's really useful to get insight into your buyer journey to help you understand like blocking points, unnecessary friction, like I said, poor follow-up time, which is, I think Chili Piper came out with their, report recently, and it's, I think on average it takes like 48 hours, 72 hours to get even follow-up from a contact sale, sometimes even more. Sometimes you don't even get followed up with. And so,
Right.
so there's definitely improvement there when we know that like the quicker you can follow up with someone who already is interested, the higher likely you are to convert. So in this day and age with all the tools and stuff, there isn't really a excuse to not have a great experience there. So it's good to figure out though what might be blocking that. And understand if it's like poorly orchestrated. There's a lot of different points and handoffs in the buyer journey between marketing and sales and having at the same time. There's communication from both ends. So what does that look like? And it can just be a great way to prove out hypothesis you have. A lot of the time you see like, oh, no one's following up with our leads in the right way. Maybe we are sending out the wrong messages. Like, what is sales sending out? Well, we're sending out marketing. Or the personalization like might be missing. Like you might get a generic email or something. So I think right now it's just really important. That's why I like this topic, because if there's anything that a company can control, it's what your buyer experience is. And even if you only get, say, like 5 leads to your website, well, let's make sure you convert those 5 leads, per month. Like, so I hear a lot of companies go, oh, we're not big enough for doing something like that. And I would beg to differ. Like, I think even CS2, we think about that journey, and our inbound, is not huge. So, and this could be your competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no matter what size, you're still putting money into getting those leads, whether it's through paid, like actual advertising, or just standing up your website. Like let's make sure that we're making the most of it. We spend a lot of time trying to get people to our website and aware of our brand, and then if we succeed at that, and then we have it just fall apart, what a waste.
Totally. You bring up like a really good point. Like a lot of the time we see marketers are like, I'm trying to drum up inbound leads. I'm doing my best to get people to come to our website. I'm doing paid ads, but like, why is our conversion so poor? It's like, well, what happens after that? Like they're, it's not like you just stop there. That's, if anything, the beginning and the easier part. It's just what happens to them when they do get found. Like, how do you nurture them? How do they get followed up with? How do they book with sales? So for sure, like, but I think in this market too, people are like, we need pipeline, go spend a lot of money to try and get inbound leads. And they're not a lot of the time just focusing on, well, what are we doing after that?
Yeah, 100%. So if I wanted to go about doing this, do you have any recommendations on like where to start and what to do?
Yeah. I mean, recently, actually, I'm like, I wish that we could create a company that did this, but I really think like creating kind of a fake domain or company name would be really useful, but that is very challenging to do unless you spend the time doing it. So if you can, that would be like awesome. Otherwise, I would maybe see like, is there a persona that you could create and use to fill out the form. So, or even a friend, like you might have a friend that meets your persona, like, hey, message them, hey, can I just use your information? Like, I promise I'll remove you afterward. But I just want to make sure that, and then they can forward on what emails they get or something like that. For us at CS2, sometimes we'll still use our information just because we are, we're not from that same company. So sometimes we'll do it for the client themselves. But if you can create a fake domain or company name, make sure it's not just a Gmail, especially if you have rules to like disqualify people who give their personal domain. But if you don't, that's even better. Use a Gmail address and put in that information for your fake company, and put in information that makes you MQL. So look at your lead scoring, like, hey, is there certain industries that score highest? Is there, a certain job title? Put that, because you also want to see how are you getting, scored? Are you MQLing? Especially if you're maybe trying out both journeys. One, if you contact sales, and one, if you just maybe say you have it like I'm a, event lead, and then I download a white paper. What happens to me? White paper, that's so old age, but you know what I mean, like a piece of
I know.
I dated myself. Finally, right there.
Ebook. an ebook, yeah, exactly. You had mentioned it's really hard to like create it and get that domain. Do you have any like color as to why that's difficult?
I mean, it's hard. I mean, first, like to pay for a domain, you have to do that. True. And then, but if you can invest in it, then you like just go and do it. I'm sure there's things out there. I was actually doing some research on like, creating a fake domain and for some it's just a little bit hard to do that with it, which makes sense because there's people that try and spoof, companies all the time. And so you can create forwarding addresses and stuff like that. So that if you use Gmail, there are some things that you can do where if there's a certain email address, then you can forward that to, your own email address and things like that. So, but yeah, be creative. It's hard to do though, because but one thing that I do suggest is you could use like a Gmail email address, and you could create like a LinkedIn profile with that, with the buyer profile. So build out like with a picture and, your first name, last name, your, some experience on there. That's like taking it to the next level. And that's what I wish we could do. But even if you create it like simple enough where like you could be found in search, that's good too. But let's be honest, like your reps are probably going to follow up, especially if you're contact sales. And so if you just have enough data there that maybe they are verifying, but it'd be interesting to figure out if they are, because that even tests like, is your buyer journey, like, are they doing research? So, but yeah, it's a bit tricky to do that. So if you could just kind of use the Gmail with your, name and domain, or if you use a friend's profile or a friendly, then that's great too. So
that's a great idea. Yeah. I mean, I laugh because right now you and I are kind of dealing with that, where some of my test data that I've been using with the client, they keep on reaching out to you and you're like, Xander, can you get rid of that, please?
Yeah.
So, at least it's working. So
yeah, there you go. I mean, that's why I can't get too mad, because I was like, hey, at least they're following up on their leads. Like it would be, exactly. Yeah, be bad if they weren't, so.
Absolutely. Okay. So we have it set up. We've established the user. We've gone through some of the journey. What are some of the insights that we should be looking into, and what can we uncover?
Yeah. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, make sure that the team knows that you're doing this. So like, I think that creates alignment too. Just give a heads up to like your market, like especially if you're a consultant doing this, make sure everyone knows you're doing it. And then for yourself, like tell your team's manager, because like if then they find out, oh wait, this is a fake person, be like, oh yeah, we know, we're just kind of testing out what happened, just to make sure like not everyone is not aware about it. So do that. Make sure you have alignment there, and it'll make sense why they would already know that when I go through it. So, but yeah, what insights can you uncover? So, I mean, the first thing is like, do you get any response at all? Like, so the first case is like, if you have a demo request, like if you have a booking agent like Chili Piper, you can book time right away. That you were like is an amazing experience already, because you're able to book with people directly. But what if you have to fill out a form and go through some qualification process? If you don't receive any response at all within like 7 days, I would probably give up with praying for one. That means that something happened. So then you can go into your test record and see, was there a reason for that? Am I MQLing and going into their queue? Is there something wrong where like there's a sync error? Is there something wrong where My scoring model is not picking it up for whatever reason, that can tell you a lot about just your own processes. Slow response time to book a demo is super common, but if everything's in place, then what happens? Like, oh, are we assigning leads to the wrong person? Is that person even there anymore? Or, sometimes we even feel like routing's outdated, and that's an issue. So what are all the things that could go beyond that? So check your CRM and what could happen there. The other things you can really see is like mismatched communication streams. So I've done a podcast in the past with Xander on like email orchestration, which I highly suggest people go back and look at, because email orchestration is super important for the buyer journey. Like, is your team sending out messages that conflict with each other? So an example of this, you could get an automated email from a rep right away. Then you might get a follow-up email that's not automated from another person that's doing the same thing. And then you might be getting an email from marketing that is following up with you at the same exact time, basically. One's from your market automation platform, one's from a sequence, and one might be like within that program, or also just a trigger in like your sales engagement tool. And so that right there just shows you that's a confusing experience. Who do I answer? Like, what mess, and then you're getting 3 emails. Like, that's not, it looks like poor communication. And then also, who is the rep? You have 2 different reps reaching out to you. So, mismatched communication can be an insight you can uncover, and just like, adapting that. How can we simplify that? How can we make sure that for leads that come through, that it's really clear? And also, if it lacks personalization, I just feel like you have an opportunity right away to not just send a generic email. So it could be prioritizing leads that are within your persona versus maybe if you have a lot of inbound, some like lower graded leads. So maybe even optimizing the process based on what type of lead it is kind of a good one. And then scoring prioritizations, like I said, like you might not become an MQL or like sales ready is what we call it instead of MQL. And then you'll see friction points. So, I highly suggest you like go through your website, not just go directly to a contact sales form and fill it out, but also go through your website and put yourself in the eyes of like your persona. Okay, how am I going to find content? I know nothing about, I know nothing about CS2. I'm going to go to their website. What do I see? Like, what is it pertain to me? Oh, what do they do? Do I know right away? If I want to find content, is that easily findable? Sometimes I found companies have a ton of content, and literally the only way you can find it is from a tiny little link in their like footer. And I'm like, well, no one's going to find that. And then it's like, is there social proof? How do I know if like companies like mine use it? Which is very necessary. And then for the content itself, is that behind a gate right now? Like a lot of the buyer journey, the prospect wants to do on their own. So if you're putting like a form in front of that, it could be really early. So yes, you're going to get a lead, and good for you. You get to add that to your lead goal, but it could actually make more sense to just educate the prospect up front. And we talk about this all the time. It's just a good reminder, because I think in times like these, like right now, where you are pressured like crazy to hit these goals, sometimes if they're even not great goals, like how many leads are you creating? Well, it should be really pipeline. And so sometimes we'll fall back on some bad habits just to try and meet those goals. Oh, let's just put a gate in front of everything. Let's just add a bunch of content and paid ads, and then just start, following up with those people right away and blasting them with emails that are not personalized at all. We don't even know if they're interested. So yeah, just look for that. Like, right, is your content gated? Are you even gathering enough info on your forms when someone does request a demo? So how can my experience be personalized based on my needs? Sometimes people, I think, over index on asking for information for things that shouldn't have it. And then they under index on how much information you should ask someone when they are interested. So contact request forms, like that's a great way to just like, what do they want to learn about? What are the pain points? And that could be either on the form itself. It can be an email survey that gets sent out prior to the demo meeting. Get creative, but that person wants to have a tailored experience. So it's a good thing to do. And then, and then I mentioned the last thing, and really this goes down to the operations part of the team, and it's so common. But there could be actual just system errors and the way you handle data that may be preventing people from getting follow-up.
That darn state and country pick list, right?
Yeah.
Which we have a great episode where Grant talks about how to normalize for that, so you don't need those validations in place. But there are many other reasons why people get blocked going into the systems, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things as you were talking about like actually experiencing the website.
Yeah.
And I empathize a lot with like web teams, right? Whether it's a web manager, a developer, like you get so into the weeds of making sure that system works that oftentimes they don't have time to step back and do the buyer's journey either, right? And like you can come in with a fresh perspective and maybe offer a lot of great feedback that they may not have heard because they're so focused on, kind of like we are, so focused on fixing all of the things that are in the weed that you don't see the bigger picture. So I think that there's definitely benefit that you can have there. And once again, just kind of preface it with what you're doing and why you're doing it so that it's not feeling like you're just snooping and putting your nose where it doesn't need to be, but you're trying to share like this is what a buyer is experiencing.
Totally. And I think that sometimes they're the one, I think people always talk, marketing ops or the operators or rev ops, like they're kind of siloed from the rest of the marketing team. I think the web team a lot of the time is siloed from the rest of the marketing team and that does a disservice. Like if anything, marketing ops or revenue ops, the web to front end, demand gen, SDR and sales, like they could all be part of this like whole kind of team, entire team committee that's working toward this. Like you all have parts of that buyer journey from the front to how they process through to when they get, followed up with by sales. And so, I think that tighter alignment, and I think they want to be part of that, right? And like you said, like sometimes they can get so much into this, I have this ticket for this request, I need to put this thing there, I need to add this thing. But and as operators, we should sympathize with that. We can feel like that sometimes. But what do we know that happens? What happens is like there's no strategy. You're just adding on feature and feature and feature, and none of it makes sense, and you just create a ton of tech debt. Well, is that happening also on the website? Part of it could just be for lack of alignment and including them in like earlier in the strategic decision.
Agreed for sure. And if you feel like you are just like in the weeds and not being strategic and you don't have that roadmap that we always talk about, like this is a really cool way to start to establish that. So, it gives you that chance to elevate.
Yeah.
What for this process, what's the most difficult thing in your opinion to like track?
Yeah, I think the hard thing that you're not going to be able to test fully is like the full funnel. Because right, like you're not an actor, you're not pretending to do the full experience, including your demo and stuff like that. So that part is harder to secret shop. And so, especially since we're talking to revenue growth architects here, like you're on the rev ops team or marketing ops or demand gen, I think focusing on everything like pre kind of demo or up to the scheduling of the demo is really useful. But then looking at leads who have gone through the full journey, and you can see with a lot of our systems, like what emails were sent out through outreach, like pre-meeting, post-meeting, sit in a demo if you want to. Like that's actually just interesting to do in general. If you are working at a company, I feel like you should always sit in a demo. And also I feel like in certain cases, if you're actually marketing the tool like demand gen, you should maybe try and be forced to do a demo. It's just really interesting to do that. I've been at companies where I have done that. So, and you'll have maybe more sympathy for your sales counterparts too. But, so that's harder to do. Like the full on experience is hard to track. And you might end up getting hiccups where like, yeah, oh, they figure out you're a test lead or whatever. But you're going to get as much insights into the main thing that we want to get insights into, I would say, is like your overall like processing. What happens like from your system standpoint, the follow-up standpoint, your sync standpoint, any errors? Are you getting put into a nurture stream? Is it the right one? Those are all things that this team or people I'm talking to have full control over. So focus on that rather than like, what's your demo experience like? Like that's the salespeople and sales managers' job to focus on.
Yep. Agree with that. And it's important to be able to trust that those teams are then responsible for that piece.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're doing the process. We're learning, like, what are ways that you would recommend sort of documenting the journey? How can you share this information out? Any tips that you may have for the audience there?
Yeah, so I think one is two is when you're doing this, maybe focus on kind of like your key stakeholders, like I said, and maybe even developing kind of like a team that you can point on and create, even if you're leading it, like have key stakeholders. So I think the first thing, like identifying who that should be. So I think like I already mentioned all those people kind of earlier, like someone on your website would be good. Not website, like the web front end, someone in demand gen, like an SDR manager, a sales manager, if you're sending directly to sales too, and they're a big part of that process, or inside sales, the marketing ops, rev ops team, having kind of some key stakeholders who have control over those pieces of the buyer journey, really letting them one, if you're leading it, let them know that you're doing that, and then also involving them in part of the process if you can't, like kind of forming a little tiger team around it. And I wouldn't say create like loads of work, but maybe first sell them on like, why is this important? And I've kind of already talked about that, but the big important thing is like, this could be your key differentiator in how you win deals. Like a lot of the time people judge how their experience as a prospect as what their experience is like as a customer and with your product. If it's very streamlined and it's a great experience from the start, they're almost going to think, oh, this is what it'll be like when I'm a customer. If it's poor and you're a prospect, it's going to be like, well, what is it going to be like once I am a customer and I've already signed the dotted line? Because I think a lot of the time we know that could degrade down from there. It maybe doesn't even get better. So I think assign team members to focus on kind of their core areas and working with them. And examples of why this can be important is like, you could have better inbound outreach with working with your SDR manager, your demand gen team. They might have the keys and the budget for a better instant booking experience. Rev ops, you're usually focused on how can we eliminate tech debt so we're not having sync errors and things like that. Are there lead views that are being created for picking up these? Like, how are those leads getting into some type of sequences? And then marketing ops, like how are those leads being nurtured and scored and so forth? And then your web team for the front end. So there's all kind of key core pieces that those team members have the budget for. They have the ways to change them and own those parts, but they all kind of fit together.
Yeah.
And so then after creating like a team together, I think a great exercise to start with is, well, it's actually two exercises now that I think about it, but one, and we talk about this in the email orchestration one, but really on the rev ups and marketing up side, being able to actually like document your inbound journey, especially from a process pipeline experience and what systems are involved and stuff like that, is very useful to just have in general and have that documented. So if you don't have that, 100% do that. Like it's just really insightful. The second piece would be like working as a team, and this could be a great exercise. And this could be even something you do like at an all hands, QBRs, or even as a tiger team in general. It could even be just you doing it too, and then looking at it. But I think dreaming up your ideal buyer experience, if you were the buyer, and then compare what that looks like to what you have today. And so I think there's like what happens operationally and then what would happen from the front end. But when we are focusing on buyer journey, kind of the fun part for the whole team to do is focus on what happens as a buyer in the buyer journey. Like what happens to me is, when I become a lead. And comparing with each other and talking about it. Because I think we've talked about this a lot in the podcast. We've talked about market, like you would want to be marketed to. But for some reason, still marketers just don't do that. They just market in the way that they've always marketed before. and marketed in the way that like I can get my head around, like, or market in the way that I can control. We're very much focused on kind of like core hard like numbers, that goals, that sometimes in the process we kind of lose sight of like, well, how do I want to, like, what would I want that experience to look like for me? And instead of what experience will help me get to my like arbitrary goals. And goal setting aside, that's, can be debated, but like, what does that look like? So I mean, maybe it just
buyer journey has changed so much.
Yeah.
And, it's nothing new that people want to be able to do research on their own. That's been the case since the advent of the internet, right? And beforehand, as much as possible, I want to just learn as much as I can before I necessarily need to talk to a person who's going to try and pitch me. I want to get like the neutral decision. And you're right. Like it's a complete counterpoint to marketing needs to be data-driven, needs to prove value, all of those things. Yes, they are really important, but if it's getting in the way of an ideal customer journey, you have to be able to tell that story as well. And this can definitely outline that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of like kind of core things that have changed. I think especially in the past, like, at least for me, from being in the space, like in the past 13 years, like it used to be, okay, you go to an event, you see a vendor, you talk to someone there, they scan your badge, you might like get a demo, or you might like watch one of their webinars. And it was very kind of like passive, in some ways, like kind of a little bit slower too. There just wasn't as much out there either. So it's like, okay, we need a webinar platform. Who should we go with? Okay, here's the 2. Now it's, okay, we need a webinar platform. Here's the 20. Go and try and figure it out, And so, and there's a lot more people involved now too. But in the end, like, you're actually not even just selling to a company, you're selling to a person. Because a lot of the time now, as buyers, if we're given that budget, we really hold like, some of that like allegiance or loyalty or, excitement around a tool, because our job will be so intertwined with it. We hold some of that value even like personally. You'd be like, I've used this tool forever. I love it. I'm going to use it again. Or, oh, like, help me get buy-in into why I should use it. Oh, this company seems really cool. It would be great to be one of their customers, something like that. But
yeah,
it just changes. And then, and in the end, like, people are just going to other places to get that social proof, like communities and, user events and things like that, to really understand like, oh, will this be good for me? Rather than just banking on, is this a great demo? Okay, I'm sold.
Absolutely. So, Crissy, we're coming up to the end of our time together. Are there any closing thoughts that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I mean, for the exercise of dreaming up your ideal buyer experience, I think do that. I went through and did it myself, and it's like kind of long, but it's typical things that I talked about, like no forms on content, only for demo request or webinar event signups. That's a no-brainer. Like, why would I just give up my information for a piece of content? A video or tool to test out your product. There's so many like cool things that you can do, even just like on your site, where you can like literally test out a platform. And I know that for enterprises are like their eyes are rolling in the back of their head, like they usually don't like showing the tool up front. But I think it's starting to become like necessary. Like people want to see what they're buying. Especially if you're a startup, like a startup that's something really useful, because if you have no brand, no, nothing, none of that, seeing that is useful. And then really the orchestration of how I'm getting followed up with. I love instant meeting booking, or if you don't have that, getting some type of follow up that's really personalized and matches my needs that I'm looking for. Even getting surveyed ahead of time. With like 2 questions of what I want to see is great. And then communication, like if it's coming from marketing, tell me all the cool things your customers are doing, or people like me and my persona. I want to know, or send me content and webinars around things that really pertain to my job and make me do it better. So these are all things that people understand and know about. But it shouldn't be crickets or people following up with me 7 days later, or automatically getting disqualified because I'm not a C-level, or, something like that. That's kind of it's just a really fun experience to do. And this is a great way to create alignment. I think a lot of revenue teams are really lacking alignment, or they're also working still like remotely, which kind of affects alignment. And so this is a great thing to rally the whole team around. And you can see instant improvements. Like you can see instant results. And that's kind of what your board, your CEO is like looking for. That's my final thing. I think it's a buyer journey is like the main thing we really are creating as revenue growth architects. Like it's a big part of it. It's like 70% of it. So it should be where we're focusing.
Yeah. I know when I started doing this type of work, like I only viewed my internal customers as my customers.
Yeah.
And it took me many years until it was like, oh, I have a direct impact on the customer journey.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I can really highlight that. So I love this topic. If it's something that you're not active, definitely take the time to build out that team. You're not going to meet a C-level person who doesn't want to make the buyer's experience better or the customer experience better, right? It's one of their top priorities. So it's something that should be fairly easy to get some buy-in on. And there's things that you can do on your own, but I love the fact that, Crissy, that you're telling our audience, let's bring in more than just you. It's not a one-person task. It's truly a team.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's great.
Thank you so much, Crissy. It's great to have you back on the podcast. And there will be many more episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Some stuff lined up, which is super exciting. So
yeah, I'll be back.
Thank you again for your time. And thank you for listening to the Revenue Growth Architects podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would so much appreciate it if you could come out and give us a review. This does help us get in front of more people. Thank you very much, and have a great day.